Hello, welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Bob Scarborough.
And we are the FAIRtax Guys.
You get this is going to get a lot of use. I've got to get a few more because coming up in election season here, this thing's going to be unscrolled a lot at town halls and everywhere else we can take it.
Excellent. And so we can make a quick note here that if you would like to get some FAIRtax gear, including those, FAIRtaxstore.org is the place to go, and we will do that. But that was an interesting discussion last week with Steve Hayes. I knew it would be because I knew that he knew Grover Norquist. You know, neither of us do, but he does. So he gave us some insight into his organization's attack on the FAIRtax, and which I thought was pretty cool. And we found another article that we're going to get into. But first, I didn't get to do this last week.
Right. On Congress.gov. They're still they're still out on vacation.
Yeah, but they're still messing with the tax code, and there are a couple of I don't think we've got anything this week that's worthy of the Hall of Shame, other than the fact that the entire tax code is the Hall of Shame. And we'll just go on like this one. Here's our first one, H.R. 5251, to amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to allow a deduction for investment advisory expenses of certain funeral and cemetery trusts during suspension of miscellaneous itemized deductions, and your favorite phrase, for other purposes. Got that?
Know when you're going to need that. For other purposes just opens the door wide on pretty much anything that language says there, which I couldn't follow.
Yeah,
has something.
To allow a deduction for investment advisory expenses of certain funeral and cemetery trusts during suspension of miscellaneous itemized deductions. Apparently, that was an expense that they used to be able to itemize on, and that miscellaneous itemized deductions has been suspended, and they want to go back to allow that particular deduction for this particular industry. Isn't that cool?
Very cool.
All right. Well, we'll leave that lie just right where it is. And this one made me scratch my head. I didn't understand this one very much, but it's H.R. 5241. It says to amend the Internal Revenue Code to provide that governmental pension plans may include certain firefighters, emergency medical technicians, and paramedics, and again, for other purposes. Why do you have to amend the tax code to allow firefighters and emergency medical technicians to participate in government pension plans? Oh, excuse me.
They must have some knowledge of how that helps out. Or maybe it's just they're used to everything coming through the tax code to get to a piece of legislation.
Could be. Okay, let's keep going here. H.R. 5238. This is the Play Act of 2023, and this one actually does have some text in it. And you open this up, H.R. 5238, and it says that this is a proposal to amend the Internal Revenue Code to provide for youth sports, to establish a grant program for recreational youth sports and for other purposes.
In case you want to make it old people sports or something at some point.
Oh, well, that's it. And we'll just put one more in here. This is another one that's got some text in it. The Small Business Investor Tax Parity Act of 2023. The Small Business Investor Tax Parity Act, H.R. 5225. And it says that is, let's see, there's the text. There it is. Has to pop up on my slow computer. To amend Section 199A of the Internal Revenue Code to allow that deduction under that section applies to qualified BDC interest dividends in the same manner as qualified REIT dividends. Now look that up. REIT meaning Real Estate Investment Trust, and BDC meaning Business Development Companies. So they're gonna just that one boggles my mind. I'm not even gonna mess with it, but I'll just let you know it's there.
your left shoulder, you'll see exactly what happens when that type of activity takes place in the tax code.
Oh, golly. Okay. Anyhow, so that's our Congress.gov segment for this week. But that's a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the Grover Norquist article that was just full of generalizations and opinions presented as fact and assorted other stuff like this. I found another one. I was specifically looking for stuff last night that we could talk about, and I found this one. It is from an organization called, let me scroll to the top here. It's the, there it is, the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy, ITEP. And it says, all right, well, wait a minute, let's kind of figure out what these people are all about. Now, I went into their about segment, and I say we're trying not too hard to get too political here, but into an insight into who these folks are. I looked at their board of directors, and there's a bunch of them, but I want to mention three of them. Joan Entmacher is now retired, formerly at the National Women's Law Center. They got another guy on their board of directors, Ed Jane, who is with the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. In other words, a public sector union. Yes. And Connie Raza, Social and Economic Justice Leaders Project. So you can kind of tell from the kind of people that work for this particular tax organization what their political leanings are, and their mission statement. ITEP is a nonprofit, claims to be a nonpartisan tax policy organization. We conduct rigorous analysis of tax and economic proposals and provide data-driven recommendations to shape equitable and sustainable tax systems. We also help make the case for raising enough revenue to truly meet all of our societal needs. Our work, here's the key, is designed to provide the best possible information and to put forth a vision of a more racially and economically equitable tax system at all levels of government. That tells you just about everything you need to know about this organization.
Well, and if you think about, we talked last week with Steve about Grover Norquist's group for tax reform. And so here are these organizations that are now chiming in at about the same, general ploy to say something that throws people off of their current and maybe growing understanding of what the fair tax is, as it's currently being presented in Congress as H.R. 25. So regardless of their political or whatever their leanings are in terms of ideology, it's almost the same, because you look at Mr. Norquist and he's the conservative, and you look at ITEP and they are.
These folks' ideology don't match up at all. But both of them are shooting at the fair tax, and neither one of them is telling the truth about it.
Right. Well, let's start. I'll let you go ahead and get started as we look at this analysis that came out in January of this year by the Federal Policy Director of the group ITEP, Steve Wamhoff. And
okay.
As if I'm pronouncing your name wrong.
Okay. Well, this starts off by saying a recent press report indicates that to win over enough support for his own party to become Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy agreed to hold a vote this Congress on the fair tax plan. That's true. A plan devised, now here's where it really goes off the rails. A plan devised years ago by the Church of Scientology to abolish the IRS and the entire federal tax system and replace it with a national sales tax. So they are saying that the fair tax is the brainchild of the Church of Scientology. And they were saying that the reason they wanted to do that is that there was a rather famous conflict between that Scientologists and the IRS claiming that the Church of Scientology is not a real church. It's more like a cult. Therefore, it is not, eligible for tax exempt status. And there was a lot of back and forth. And so saying that the Scientologists hatched this fair tax plan just simply to get rid of the agency that was causing them a lot of grief. And that's not so. The fair tax was designed by economists hired by Houston businessmen who were tasked with the idea of, just creating the most equitable, the fairest, the best tax system they could possibly come up with that would raise the same amount of money as the income tax. And as far as I know, I don't know if any of those economists that devised the fair tax were Scientologists or not. I do know that there are some Scientologists, behind they're promoting the fair tax, but they did not design and put it together.
Right, that's right. We all know the specifics surrounding the 23% sales tax versus 30%, and the woman that's writing this article says it's actually even higher than that. We know that the 30% is a number that's used a lot in describing what happens when the fair tax gets enacted. When in reality, in other words, we buy something that's $100, you pay $30 of national sales tax inside the $100, not exclusive, but inclusive of the $100. And so there's a line in this article I'll just go ahead and read. If enacted, the tax would almost surely be amended to have an even higher rate. Back in 2004, William Gale at the Tax Policy Center estimated that simply replacing the taxes eliminated under the plan would require the national sales tax to have a rate of 60%, which is
I would note that they are quoting the opinion of one man. I don't know who William Gale is at the Tax Policy Center, but he says, oh, mercy, you're going to have a 60% rate. That's one side. But I tend to believe that if you're talking to a team of economists who were charged with raising the same amount of money as the income tax, and this group of esteemed economists says a 23% inclusive rate will do it, I'm tempted to go with their opinion rather than this other guy.
Absolutely. Well, the one thing that is in the headline of this article, and I'll read the headline of the article from the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy's Federal Policy Director, Steve Wamhoff. The title of the article in the blog on this page is "Fair Tax Plan Would Abolish the IRS and Shift Federal Taxes from the Wealthy to the Rest of Us." And that is in line with their political ideology. Everything is a tax cut for the rich, and it's going to try to screw the middle class over. That is an argument against every tax reform proposal that you ever see. Well, we know that the big golden egg in the fair tax is the fact that the prebate comes in and brings everybody relief from taxes up to the poverty level on items that are essential to a family. And it doesn't really, the bill HR 25 doesn't say what your essential needs are. You get the money if you have 4 people in your house, or 6, or 2, or just yourself. Yeah, all you get untaxed up to the poverty level. So and then immediately behind that, you have to look at your pay stub and say, okay, well, under the fair tax, I won't have the federal income tax coming out, the withholding that my boss has got to take care of, and that I take care of the other half. None of that comes out anymore. So immediately you get relief in that check, plus the prebate. And I think working families that have maybe one income, or one a single mom, for example, with raising two kids and having to work 2 jobs, ends up in a better position than she was before. According to the article, the idea behind the proposal seems to be that it would facilitate abolition of the IRS because states already collect sales taxes and would be better suited to collect additional sales tax for the federal government and remit the money to the Treasury. The bigger problem is that states have little incentive to take over collecting nearly all revenue for the federal government. Well, that's not true either, is it?
Nope, they get to keep a percentage of it. Although this article says that's not a big enough cut to get their interest. But hey, money is money, and any government that can get their hands on some is going to do this. I want to get back to something you mentioned just a second ago. This article does a lot of the things that dishonest articles against the fair tax do. The first time it, of course, presents the fair tax as this huge tax that's going to be levied on everything you buy and raise your thing. And they completely divorce, if they mention it at all, they completely divorce the prebate and its effect on the overall tax rate. This article says, while the fair tax does provide families with rebates that could equal several $1,000s a year, this is not nearly enough to offset the financial hit that most Americans would face from the new national sales tax. Again, that's an opinion presented as fact. How do you know it's not nearly enough to offset the financial hit? We have shown time and time again on this program that a lower level, lower economic family who spends just at or just above the poverty level would have a tax rate of next to nothing. So yeah, it would indeed be more than enough to offset the financial hit that most Americans would face from this new national sales tax if most of that financial hit is refunded back to you. They never say that a person or a family that spends $40,000 a year would have an effective tax rate of 0.3% under the fair tax. They just claim that, oh, this not enough. And it's just garbage. If you look at the numbers and figure it out for yourself, you'll find that these folks are just blowing smoke.
Well, and that's the thing. If you throw a bunch of words out there on a piece of paper, and it's essentially the same every article that goes against the fair tax, if you look at it, put them side by side and analyze them, they all end up doing nothing but attempt to confuse somebody who's trying to learn as much as they can about the fair tax, a tax on consumption, as opposed to the income tax. So it's like, how do you muddle through all of the different articles like this one from ITEP that you get more and more confused, and finally you just say, okay, I'm going to stop for a minute. My head's hurting because I really don't know. And I'll say this while we're on this. You go to the FAQ page on FAIRtax.org, and a lot of what we're seeing can be debunked in this article or in Grover Norquist's article, et cetera, can be debunked through that frequently asked questions page at FAIRtax.org.
Yeah, but you know what is a glaring omission in this article? They don't really say that the fair tax replaces the income tax. And when you replace the income tax, you do away with federal withholding, meaning people will bring home their entire paycheck. You do away with federal withholding and federal payroll taxes. So all they talk about is this huge hit that this new tax is going to put on you. They don't tell you that without even getting a raise from your employer, you're going to be bringing home a significantly bigger paycheck. You will never have to file an income tax return again. All the good things that the fair tax does for people just somehow get omitted in articles like this.
That's exactly right. And essentially the last segment of this article deals with the fallacy that the fair tax would cut taxes for the well-off and raise them for everyone else. While the fair tax does provide families with rebates that could equal several $1,000s a year, this is not to offset the financial hit most Americans would face from the new national sales tax.
That statement is just simply not supported. In fact, we've shown several times that the fact that a lower income family now, they, even if they don't pay any income tax, they lose at least 7.65% of their income to federal payroll taxes, the most regressive taxes on the book. There's no exemptions, no deductions from that. Those taxes apply from $1. Doesn't matter how much you make, they're going to take the same percentage from a person making $50,000 as they do from somebody making $500,000. That is the textbook definition of what a regressive tax looks like and how it works, because somebody making $500,000 can easily afford to lose 7% of their income. Somebody making 50 cannot afford. That's a big hit for them. And so the fair tax gets rid of that. You bring home your entire paycheck. You have no federal payroll taxes. And as we showed, a family making $40,000 a year, we went through these numbers a couple of weeks ago. That family will pay a tax rate under the fair tax of 0.3%, 0.3%, versus 7.65%. Now, you tell me which tax system is better for lower income earners. No contest. It's a no-brainer. And these folks, they never get into those numbers that show that this vast 30% rate is reduced down to nearly zero for the lower income people.
And the other side of it too that this article covers, and again, most of these articles just are at the surface, and they just throw a bunch of words out that basis in any kind of detail within the article, nor do they send you where you can more. So they go through in the last paragraph of our friend's article here in ITEP. Eliminating the personal income tax would mean elimination of the child tax credit, which is a greater blow now that the Trump tax law has doubled that credit. It would also mean that families receiving tax credits to help pay health insurance premiums under the Affordable Care Act would lose those tax credits and instead pay a new national sales tax on their premiums. The cost of tax could be even greater now for typical Americans than when this particular policy organization warned the public about this plan years ago. So they've been working.
Okay, the rest of the story, they are trying to imply that if the child tax credit goes away, then that is money that the people who are getting that tax credit will never see again. The idea now, as the fair tax shifts your source of taxation from income to consumption, that the kind of help that people are getting under the child tax credit would shift from the tax code to specific legislation giving people the same relief that they were getting under the tax code. The fact that the tax credit goes away doesn't mean that the help goes away, because that can be implemented again through regular legislation.
That's right, where it should be. And as we always say, as you always point out, when we go through congress.gov, why are we doing all of this through the tax code? What's the purpose? Well, it's the purpose to kind of keep the tax code at a level of importance, the income tax at a level of importance where where today what we're talking about is something that makes it much more simple and efficient and transparent.
Yes, well, back in 2004, the estimated the fair tax was enacted. The sales tax rate would have to be set at 45%. The poorest 80% of Americans would face net tax hikes. They would not. Their taxes would be next to zero if they were spending at the poverty level. And most among the richest 20% would enjoy net tax cuts. Again, that's just show me the proof. Where are the numbers that support that position? And that that's just simply an allegation. An opinion presented is fact. Because I can guarantee you that when the fair tax comes into play, people that are these high income people who have got all the tax code is just chock full of exemptions, deductions, loopholes, legal ways that people like Donald Trump, who have a lot of money, pay very little taxes. Remember the ProPublica leaks, remember the Trump's tax returns. They got into that and trying to say, well, this is how these people don't pay any tax. Well, if that goes away, I guarantee you that those folks who are using all of the legal means within the existing tax code to reduce their tax liability by a significant amount ain't going to have those exemptions and loopholes and deductions under the fair tax. If you buy something new or engage a service, you pay the tax. End of story. And the higher your spending level rises above the poverty level, the higher your effective out-of-pocket tax rate is. It is a mathematical certainty. So the idea that it's going to move the tax burden from the rich to the middle class and the poor is just bogus. We've got the numbers that show otherwise.
That's right. And who wouldn't be able to look at? And again, the article stays at a level where they don't get into this particular article, where it doesn't get into specific details. So, hey, if you're working 3 jobs, you're immediately going to get a raise in the check because your federal withholding is not going to be taken out. You're going to get that back. Your boss is going to get his half of your withholding for Social Security and retirement. And
the employer matching part of those payroll taxes is a cost to the employer for having the employee. When he no longer has to pay that money to the government as payroll taxes, he can give it to the employee.
They do
and
that.
And it won't cost him any more than that employee is already making.
Right. Plus the benefit of the prebate. Those 2 things right there. And you think about it. Mom with 3 kids is working is a single parent in the home. Now has an opportunity to look at her finances and say, okay, I think I can maybe cut back a few hours a week and go home at 3 o'clock and be there when the kids jump off the bus, as opposed to not having to work into the evening in a second shift, and the societal challenges that happens there in the various neighborhoods across America. And so it gives an empowerment to the folks that this article basically is trying to scare into thinking that this ain't what you need. You don't need the fair tax, when in reality, it'll be the best thing for that working mother.
Yeah, well, clearly the fact that an article like this, the article like our letters like Grover Darquist and all, or the reason the fair tax is coming under heavier attack now than it has in the past is that in the past it was just seen as it was not a threat to the status quo. It was not a threat to the people who are making money off the current income tax system. But now that the fair tax has been promised a vote in the House of Representatives, and people that are in Congress are going to have to, vote. Do you like the fair tax? Do you want to get rid of the income tax, or do you want to, keep it? Do you want to keep the IRS in business, or do you want to put them out of business? And when people see that their representatives are voting to keep this corrupt, intrusive, inefficient, the adjectives you can use to describe the income tax are endless. But when people find out that their representatives want the income tax over the fair tax, and people realize what benefits the fair tax can be to them, some of those guys are going to be in trouble. So they are trying to knock it down, so help get them covered to defend their votes.
One of the questions that I always get asked is, could the fair tax and the income tax run essentially be together? And I think that's where articles go in blowing the smoke that we always talk about. And so as a volunteer with the fair tax, no current supporter of the fair tax, me, you, others, would support it unless the entire income tax is repealed. So,
it's in the bill that the fair tax cannot be permanently implemented until the 16th Amendment is repealed, and the 16th Amendment is what made a income tax constitutional. If that goes away, income taxes become unconstitutional again, and there'll be no way to have an income tax on top of the fair tax, which is good news. The bad news, though, is we're out of time again. We're going to have to wrap up this edition of Fair Tax Power Radio. Thank you again so much for watching, listening, and sharing the videos. Until we meet again, I'm Bob Paxton.
I'm Bob Scarborough.
We are the FAIRtax Guys, reminding you the fair tax is the only truly fair tax, and once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
So what do you need from me to get these taxes collected?
Glad you asked, because there is a fair amount of information you need to be aware of.
That's your tax plan?
Oh, no, this is just the revisions for this year's tax plan. What I need from you is you need to keep track of all of your income, as well as any taxes that you've already paid. Also, any gifts that you received or gifts you've given to churches or charities or individuals throughout the entire year. Do you do any side jobs?
Every now and again.
Great, because there's some more information about that right here. Everything you need to know right here. So just simply compile that, send it in to us. Be careful, make sure there's no mistakes. If we do find mistakes were made, we can fine you or, throw you in jail. So you might want to be aware of that.
And what do you need from me?
As an individual, nothing. As a business owner, or if you're doing side jobs, yes, you would have to collect taxes on that, but, well, it's all right here.
Can I get a